Adam.
I'm Andy.
And this is a twice a week film review podcast where we look at movies from our list of shame or blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
In our prior episode, we talked about 1933's Invisible Man, and we also talked about 2020's Invisible Man.
Yes.
I was going to say 1920s. I don't know why.
1920, 2019, 2020.
One of those dates, Invisible Man. And what movie we decided to pair with the 1933 Invisible Man is
Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon from 2000 because he's also an invisible man.
So let's talk about that.
Let's do it.
4 years ago, this committee gave me a very specific and challenging task: to successfully phase shift a human being out of quantum sync with the visible universe and return him safely with no after effects. Well, we found that sending them to Never Neverland was easy. It's the getting them back that's hard.
All right, 2000's Hollow Man. It's directed by Paul Verhoeven.
Paul Verhoeven.
Who's done RoboCop, Starship Troopers, Total Recall. I mean, a bunch of these kind of early 90s, late 80s kind of really out there kind of action sci-fi movies. Like, he's definitely a singular kind of vision of a director, I think. His movies are uniquely his, I would say.
Yeah.
Even though he would say Hollow Man doesn't fit that mold, actually does feel like a Verhoeven movie to me.
Hollow Man does seem like a Paul
I would say Hollow Man feels like a Paul Verhoeven movie. So I was reading on IMDb trivia that he felt like a lot of other directors of that day and age can make it.
Yeah.
But I do feel like some of the gore elements, and I felt like in the way the sci-fi was handled, I do feel like that to me speaks Paul Verhoeven.
Okay. I mean, Paul Verhoeven, I don't know. The movie that I've seen the most of his, because I've seen it a million times, is RoboCop.
Okay.
So I've seen Total Recall and Showgirls and the other ones that you mentioned, but
I think Starship Troopers is mine.
Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
See, I've only seen Starship Troopers maybe twice, so I feel like I need to rewatch. And I like Starship Troopers. Don't get me wrong, but I just haven't seen it very much. I feel like I need to rewatch a lot of his films because I don't really know what his style is, other than I would say a lot of his movies are pretty graphic. I mean, RoboCop is fairly graphic and violent. Showgirls is not violent, but graphic, I guess. Especially the French
Starship
Fry
Troopers, same thing. I would say graphic and violent. Yeah. Total Recall. So this is a movie we've both seen, but for both of us, we kind of talked about this before.
Long time.
It's been a long time. I probably haven't seen it since it came out,
Same
or
here.
shortly thereafter.
Yeah, so 20 years ago would be the last time we saw it.
So what'd you think of the movie?
I did not like it much at all, honestly.
I don't think it holds up to scrutiny of this day and age.
Nah,
But I do think there are some really good elements in this movie, and I think there's some things that the special effects to me, whether they look a little dated, I think are still really good.
Yeah, I didn't really have a problem with the special effects,
and I think
honestly.
they're pretty well done. And there's a lot of parts of the movie to me that seems like it's pretty well thought out. So I don't know if that's Paul Verhoeven doing it or the writer, but I feel like they kind of thought about what the implications of what a Hollow Man would be like in that day and age.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of thought it through. So there are some elements that I think are pretty well thought out.
Okay.
With it. But I will say this, if you haven't seen the movie, in today's context, the movie has like some sexual violence.
Yes. Against
two women in the movie. And one of them, I was reading the IMDb trivia and it says it was cut, but I don't think it was cut because that thing was still readily apparent, at least in the copy I was watching. It was,
I was gonna say I read the same thing, and I wonder if because you and I watched the same copy, I wonder if it was put back in for that because I thought the same thing. Yeah,
it was. I feel like that should be excised from the movie altogether. Like I don't think it does much to add to the movie, but I understand that the movie is of its time.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we talked about when we talked about Return of the Joker is that the music choices in there are very early 2000s music choices.
Yeah.
Like the kind of new metal in the soundtrack does not hold up to this day and age. Like it's very jarring.
Yeah.
Like I felt it was in Return of the Joker.
Right. I didn't care for this movie, and I honestly think when I saw it originally, I think I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
But I might just be confusing it with Stir of Echoes because I also think I might have liked Stir of Echoes, and maybe I didn't like Hollow Man. Either way, I didn't think this movie was very good at all anymore. I had problems with So I thought that the setup, as far as we're experimenting on animals, they're already invisible. Basically, so when the movie starts, the gorilla's invisible and like
Yep.
the dog and stuff is invisible. And so the next step is to, hey, let's try it on a human.
And the opening scene is that invisible cat that bites that rat.
Yeah, was it a cat or the gorilla? I thought it was the gorilla that bites the rat.
It had
I
like
don't know.
fangs.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought it was a cat.
I thought it was like a
Maybe
big
it was a gorilla
creature.
because its neck was being crushed, and I don't think
Yeah.
cats can or that have that dexterity.
Right.
But yeah, that kind of caught me off guard. And there's a lot of like also violence towards animals, which I feel like thinking about Starship Troopers is kind of like a a calling card, I would say a little bit.
So I was going to get to that. I thought the movie, it starts off fine. I didn't really necessarily have problems with it. The biggest problem is once Kevin Bacon becomes invisible, a lot of his actions I just didn't feel like he would do. I just didn't feel like they developed it enough for me to actually buy the fact that he would do these things. They do kind of pay lip service to the fact that he's kind of a creep because he dated Elizabeth Shue. It didn't work out. He's still kind of very jealous and like who's she? And also, if he can't see that she's dating Josh Brolin's character, he's incredibly stupid.
Well, he's also like leering at Rona Mitra's character, like across like the quad or whatever in that other building. So I think to me, like I hear your point, but to me that I felt like that was enough to establish like this guy is definitely a creep.
Well, I think yes, he's definitely a creep, but I think there's still a pretty big gap, or at least I hope there is a pretty big gap. I don't know, between him just being a peeping tom and actually physically assaulting her. I didn't know that I didn't necessarily think that he would go that far. But that's even if you can buy into that later in the movie and again, I feel like Paul Verhoeven or whoever, maybe the writer said, oh wait, we're making a horror movie here. We need to have a bunch of deaths. And so all of a sudden he just becomes a killing machine and he's killing everybody. I really didn't feel like he would go that far. And that's I'll give you the fact that he kind of molests these women because he's a creepazoid. But later in the film, when he goes into a full-blown mass murderer, I just didn't buy it at all. I never thought that was plausible to me.
I think the killing is more justifiable for his character than him sexually assaulting the girls. I do think the sexually assaulting too far. I would rather just have him like leering and being creepy. I felt like they could accomplish the same thing if he was just wandered into a room and watched her undress and just left. Like I felt like that would have gave the movie so much more than actually seeing him. But
true.
Kirby definitely called it at the end. She's like, these people are going to die. All the scientists are just like cannon fodder. So
well, and again, I felt like all of a sudden they were like, oh crap, we're making a horror movie. We better, because up to that point, you mentioned animal violence. I was going to say one thing that they're like, okay, we're going to make this guy a real villain. If the sexual assault and everything is not enough for you, he commits the cardinal sin in the movie, which is he kills a dog. And I know,
which is the opposite of saving the cat, which if you're a screenwriter, you might have heard of that, but that's an inside joke.
but I always think it's funny, a million people can die in a movie. Like there's a lot of people that die in this movie. Nobody bats an eye, but you kill a dog.
Like we didn't care.
That's the last straw.
We didn't care about the Invisible Man derailing a train.
Right.
There could have been dogs on that train.
Right. There could have been dogs on
the train. But we didn't care about that. But we see him like bat a dog against an invisible dog.
Yeah, you don't even see. There's nothing. You don't see
Yeah.
anything. You see the heat signature of the
Which like I said, I think that's very cool. Kind of use of technology. Like I thought that was really well thought out, and that's something I felt was missing from the 2000s or 2020 New Invisible Man.
I know. I kept waiting for them to get some infrared goggles.
Like
or something.
I feel like infrared goggles are pretty like. You can get scopes for like guns and stuff like that. So I feel like they're readily available for most consumers. So, you have spy stores and all that kind of stuff. So I was really hoping for something like that in the new movie. Yeah. But I like that they kind of had infrared cameras everywhere. I like that they had those infrared goggles, even though those don't even look like they would really work. They look cool. I like that he turns up the heat to make it his body temperature. So, because with all the steam and stuff, so it's harder to find him. Mm-hmm. Like, I think they kind of did some well thought out things. I like they kind of had a throwaway line that caught Kirby off guard, but I thought this was really cool, was when he said like, turn down the lights, I have invisible eyelids. Like you do think like, your irises on your eye kind of focus and you do kind of squint when you're in bright areas. And if he doesn't have that ability to kind of, if it loses one of those, biomechanical functions to do that, it kind of makes sense. So I felt like, the screenwriter kind of thought this through a little bit and in the update. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree that some of those little ideas like that were pretty cool, but couldn't he just get like a heavy blanket or something and just put it over it?
He should have, yeah.
Something like that.
Or laid face down. I mean, that would have
Something,
worked.
yeah. I mean, it may be hard to sleep like that,
I
but
don't
yeah,
know.
something.
Because so the way I understand it is the way we see things is, visible light bounces off and it goes back in our eyes, and that's how we see those colors.
Yeah.
So if he's invisible and he's laying face down on the blanket, that means, and we could see, or he's laying face down on the mat, that means the light would be bouncing out. So maybe that's not enough. So maybe he would have to hide under a blanket.
Something, yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting. I like this. I like this idea.
Yeah. It's more interesting than the movie.
For sure. I like that they put a latex mask on him. And I'm sure they did that for practical reasons because, special effects and using that for the whole movie would be very difficult.
Yeah.
But I think it leads to some cool things. Like, with him trying to hide from the security guard and him scaring the kids in the car. Like, I thought, like...
Which I did like that part. That was funny.
That was funny. I thought those were very cool. And I thought, like, the idea of putting a latex mask on him was very interesting update to, like, the ace bandages you have in the 1933 one.
Right. It reminded me of that. Wasn't there well, first of all, there's the movie Drive where doesn't he wear what's it called? The handsome man mask? Although this is not a handsome man mask, but it's this latex kind of looking kind of thing. It's a lot more sculpted.
The Mike
face
Myers
wise,
mask?
Yes, the Mike Myers mask
Myers
from Baby
mask.
Driver. No, it kind of, for some reason, it kind of reminded me of that, but I don't know.
And this movie was nominated for Best Special Effects in 2000.
Oh, was it? I didn't even...
For
I didn't
Academy
see
Award
that.
and lost The Gladiator.
Interesting.
But, like I said, I think the special effects do look of its time. Some of it looks dated, but I think the idea behind them is very cool. And the leads on on his face when he's invisible, I think those were done practically, and those look awesome, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could have been done CGI. It would have been really hard to do it. But I think they probably put stiff wires in the cords of the leads. That way they'd stay in place. And I thought that looked very cool, and it was a very cool idea to kind of have them.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to call out is that I noticed right away that when he entered the building for the first time, he had to give his thumbprint along with a voice password or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think your thumbprint would work whenever you're invisible. So every time he skips out into the night, I have no clue how he gets back into the lab by the morning.
I honestly didn't even think about that.
I don't know why that caught out to me, but I was like, thumbprint. I wonder what happens when he's invisible. And that just kind of like set with me the whole movie.
So I was going to say the cast of this film, obviously Kevin Bacon is the Hollow Man. Elizabeth Shue is his sort of ex-girlfriend who's now dating Josh Brolin, not James Brolin.
Yeah, his character's name's Matt.
Josh Brolin, and then one face that in the movie. So when I saw this movie originally, I had no clue who Kim Dickens was. So Kim Dickens is I think you said she had bad hair with the red hair girl.
Oh yeah, I hope Kim Dickens never sees this episode, but I feel sorry for whoever made her wear that haircut because that was not flattering at all.
I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was late 90s, early 2000s. But I didn't know who she was, when I saw this. And then, but I feel like nowadays she's everywhere. She was in Deadwood. She's in Gone Girl. She was in Fear the Walking Dead for a while.
Yeah.
She was in Lost, even Sons of Anarchy, because I just went through the seasons of Sons of Anarchy within the last couple of years. She's in a few episodes of that, and now she's even on there's a mini series, kind of like I think it's a 10-episode limited series on USA called Briar Patch. She plays a cop on that. So Kim Dickens seemingly is everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I was watching the movie, I was like, hey, there's Kim Dickens. Of course, I don't think I knew her name. I had to look it up. I was like, hey, there's that girl that's in Fear the Walking Dead and Briar Patch.
As much as I feel like they thought things through, I do feel like, and I feel like Hollywood does this a little bit, is they don't really know what real life is. And I say that in the way of the way people dress to go work at a lab just doesn't hold up to scrutiny, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of any professional environment minus like a modeling agency or something like that where women would show up wearing like crop top shirts,
Right.
like with their bellies and midriff showing.
Right.
Like that was definitely like a call that was just like, okay, we're gonna suspend reality here, because I've never once, and I've worked in the corporate environment in the 2000 area, and I can tell you for sure I never saw one crop top walking around.
You didn't see Elizabeth Shue? Somebody
No.
that looked like Elizabeth Shue walking around? No?
And it kind of has like the
Or
whole
Josh
like
Brolin?
industrial, we're off the grid kind of, lab and stuff
Yeah,
like
they're
that.
in like some weird abandoned warehouse looking thing, right?
Yeah, I guess that's some of the things you kind of got to suspend your disbelief. But it was one of those things I was watching. I'm like, yeah, I don't think people will be working around lab with animals in their like normal clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Getting back to the Kevin Bacon thing, I I do think that they do try and say everything they can to make you believe what's going to come later on in the movie. So they do make him a creep. They do make him a peeping tom. He's creepy about dating Elizabeth Shue before. They do make him not care about the animals, right? Because
Because he's like, well, slice the grill open.
right. He doesn't matter. But I just didn't feel like it was. I never felt like any of those points were driven home enough for me. So then when you get to the end part of the movie, and he suddenly is running around killing people, he's like a movie monster. I guess he was supposed to be. He's supposed to be like the Invisible Man. But I just never really. It just did not work for me.
Yeah, I get that. And I think for me, when I was watching, I just kind of felt like this was part of the movie. So this is where I knew it was going.
Yeah.
And, since I've seen it before, I kind of remember parts of it. So I think I wasn't as skeptical about that. But I can definitely see that. I think they did need to either lead him up to a little bit more, like have him like kill an animal, before he takes the serum, right? He's like, no, he's like, nothing gets in the way of science, right? Yeah. Like maybe that would have been a good, I'm spitballing ideas here. Maybe that would have been a good character trait for him because, a little bit later on in the movie, he kind of decides to experiment on himself. So what if, the agency is working for the government wants to shut him down, and, because he won't tell him the truth for whatever reason, but he's like, no, nothing gets in the way of progress.
Yeah.
I'm a genius. I say this goes. And so, he will go against what his lab assistants or his coworkers says, maybe by killing an animal, and then he decides to take it upon himself to kind of experiment on himself. Like that would have kind of, I think, you're kind of wanting, it would kind of lead to that trajectory of him kind of wanting to do everything himself and just kind of lead down that path.
Well, and even just something as simple as like they did in the 1933 Invisible Man, and I mentioned this in the other episode, just saying, well, this might lead to some kind of instability, some neural instability or something like that. Maybe.
And I'm trying to remember, and I think they try to say something like that with the gorilla when it bites Josh Brolin.
I agree.
I do think they're trying to say the serum's kind of making things agitated, but I agree with you. There could have been more, work done to kind of
I felt like there needed to be more development of all of those traits, those personality traits that he had, because it would have made the movie a lot better to me. When he starts killing people at the end. I understand that ultimately this is a horror film, so they need to have some kind of monster, which is him killing people, doing whatever. But to me, it just came out of. I don't want to say it came out of nowhere, but it just didn't feel like a natural progression. So
it felt like it was the movie putting it together, rather it was something that was naturally unfolding for you. Right? I agree with that.
So, but there's a Hollow Man 2.
which we have not seen.
Right. Well, I think we need to check that out. Apparently it has Christian Slater.
And Peter Facinelli.
Peter, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, he was in one of my favorite TV shows from the 90s, directed with a pilot by Mick G called Fastlane. But he's also like one of the vampire parents in the Twilight series.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I think he's... that name just jumps out to me. I like the 90s Fastlane. Again, probably doesn't hold up by modern standards, but it was a fun series to watch when it came out.
Well, I was going to say this movie, and I feel this way about a lot of movies that came out in the 90s and the 2000s. Even though I ultimately didn't like the movie, I still had fun watching it, honestly, because I grew up, in that era and remember it very well. And so even watching a quote unquote bad movie from the 90s or in this case 2000 is still fun.
Yeah.
It's still I'm not sorry that I rewatched it. I just was ultimately disappointed with it.
Yeah, I was never bored. I just think it's it's good. Like I said, I feel like the sexual assaults kind of bring it down a whole bunch in my book. Like it's probably a movie I
Well,
won't
that
revisit
seems to
again.
be the main thing that sticks out in people's memories
Yeah.
about this movie.
Which I didn't remember before I saw it.
I didn't either. But I think somebody after we saw Invisible Man 2020, I was looking on the internet and I was reading some comments and somebody said, "How is this better than Hollow Man?" And
Yeah.
somebody says, "Yes, and less rapey," or something like that. So it's like definitely people remember that particular
Yeah.
scene, or two scenes really, but one much more graphic than the other.
I agree.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think the thought behind the special effects and the rendering of special effects, even though they look of its time, were very cool. Like I like how the when you see the serum get injected, you see it go through like the veins and all that kind of stuff, and you see it fill in the organs, and then it gets to the bones, and then it goes to the skin. Like I thought, someone made it look like they looked at biology and studied how biology works and rendered it on the screen. So I thought that was really well done.
I agree they did a good job with that. Do you think is this the movie that killed Paul Verhoeven's American career? Because after Hollow Man, he has not made he actually moved back to the Netherlands, is what I read.
Well,
and he did. I mean, he still makes movies,
Yeah.
but he just doesn't make the treasures like RoboCop or Total Recall. He doesn't make movies in America anymore.
I don't know if this movie did well or not, but I did, like I said, I read that trivia where he said he wasn't happy with the product. So he might have put himself in like self-exile.
Yeah.
But I think I remember the movie doing fairly well, so I would imagine he would still
I think it did.
he'd still have a Hollywood kind of career. I do think since like the 2000s, I do think this is kind of like the capstone on that kind of movie, because I do think later on in the 2000s, movies started getting more serious. Because, like, and the perfect example for me is if we look at the James Bond movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Pierce Brosnan movies are a lot of fun, but not a lot of, like, thought of how this would actually be in the real world is kind of thought out. It's just more like, oh, yeah, these are movies, these are all flights of fancy kind of thing. So let's just make it all fantasy and stuff like that. But then when you get to, like, the Daniel Craig James Bond, which came out in, I think, 2006, Casino Royale. Right. It's uber realistic. And then, before that, you had the Bourne movies that kind of led to that. So I do think, around that 2000s, there is a shift in the tone and what people would want from a movie. And they wanted it more grounded and more based in realism. So maybe, and thinking and looking at Verhoeven's kind of film career before that, maybe those don't necessarily fit in with the kind of movies he's used to making or likes to make.
And to be honest with you, I haven't seen any of the films that he's made since he went back there. They're probably good. I'm not judging at all, but I did find that interesting when I was looking at his filmography. Like, oh, Hollow Man's like the last thing he did in America, and then he's gone on to greener pastures elsewhere.
So would you recommend people watch it again, revisit it again after we've seen it?
Yeah. I mean, I again, like you said, I never found it boring. Yeah. I mean, I didn't like it, but it was certainly watchable. And yes, there's some things about it that you definitely would not want to see in a movie now. You didn't want to really necessarily want to see in a movie then. They should cut that out. But, it is what it is. It's a product of its time. So
yeah, I would say just kind of know what you're getting into going into it. And like you said, it's not necessarily boring the whole time, but it does definitely feel of its time.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that was our review of Hollow Man. Unless there's anything else you want to add?
No, that's it.
All right, and now we have a viewer question.
So the viewer question, lo and behold, it ties in very well.
Imagine that. It matches our theme.
It's crazy how that works.
It's weird.
So strange. But
and the other weird thing is that we're getting viewer questions when we haven't published episodes yet.
Yeah, but we have family.
Yeah, we have fans for the future.
So the viewer question for this week is basically, what is your favorite movie monster? It doesn't have to be a Universal movie monster. It could be Jason Voorhees, could be Freddy Krueger, whatever. But what is your favorite movie monster? So I'll let you tackle if you've given it some thought.
I did give it some thought. I feel like my friend Steve would be really mad at me if I didn't mention Godzilla, because he's a big Jaiku Godzilla fan and introduced me to a lot of the was it Soho Tokyo, or the people that made the Godzilla movies.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But I have another friend who is also influential in my growing up, Jerry, and he he beat me into submission to like werewolves. So I would say probably of all the movie monsters, werewolves are probably my favorite.
Okay.
And I think my favorite werewolf movie is Ginger Snaps is really good. I haven't seen American Werewolf in Paris, in London.
In London.
I think I have seen in Paris because that came out in the late 90s,
Yeah,
right?
so I'm the opposite. I've seen the first one. I don't
So
think I've ever
that
seen
might
the
be a
second
good double feature for us to see.
Yeah.
But my favorite werewolf movie is Dog Soldiers.
Oh, great movie.
I think that movie's
Dog
great.
Soldiers, yeah.
And I think my friend Steve calls it Night of the Living Dead with werewolves because it's kind of like you're on a house and they're attacking. But I think that is the best werewolf movie I've seen. I haven't seen The Howling, so there's probably a lot of blind spots for me in the movies
I
I've
feel
seen.
like I'm pretty deficient. I might have seen The Howling, but if I have, I can't remember.
Yeah. But for me, like Dog Soldiers, I like that the werewolves are like 9 feet tall.
Oh, they look awesome.
Yeah, they look great. And he did the director did the remake the reboot of Hellboy. Because remember the goat.
What's his name? Neil Marshall? What's his name?
I think so. It sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
It might be because the goat creature in the Hellboy remake looks a lot like the design for the werewolves and Dog Soldiers.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
This is the kind of way they look. But I like those like 9 foot tall because like they're on the second story window. I feel like the werewolves are just like peeking in.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff. I think it's a very cool, very fun werewolf movie.
Yes, it is.
Something I would like to go back and revisit and maybe we can review in the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, Freddy Krueger's awesome. We can probably list a whole bunch of movie monsters and there's probably a bunch that I'm missing. But because of Monster Squad and because of Dog Soldiers and all other werewolf movies, I think werewolves are probably my favorite movie monster.
Gotcha.
What about yourself? What is your favorite movie monster?
Well, so I was thinking about this, and one of my favorite horror films, or two of my favorite horror films of all time, three of my favorite horror films of all time.
Four of your favorite.
Four of mine. Do I hear five? Do I hear six? Six. You, sir.
I'll buy that for $1.
Yes. No. Well, I'm thinking from. This isn't my final answer, but from the 70s, I love the original Halloween. So I've got. I guess these are honorable mentions.
Okay, yeah.
I love Michael Myers. Not Mike. I love Mike Myers too. I have nothing against him, but I love Michael Myers, the killer in the Halloween series. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
I have
with
not seen
Leatherface. That's on your list for sure. We could probably tackle that around Halloween time.
Yeah, I think we should.
Makes sense. But Leatherface and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre are great. And then one of my top 10 favorite films of all time is George Romero's Dawn of the Dead from 1978. But zombies,
they're way too much in popular media.
I couldn't in good conscience pick a zombie as my favorite monster of
although they're good zombie movies, I feel like the Walking Dead TV series just kind of beat that dead horse.
It's definitely going on for a long time and there's no end in sight. Apparently.
I fell out about like season 2 or 3 and I think you're still watching it.
I do still watch. I can't give up on it now. I've been watching. You
invested
it for
too much time.
10 seasons or whatever it is now. I can't even remember. But my pick is maybe kind of odd, but and honestly because there's two movies that I believe. I don't think there's any more than that. There's two movies with this monster, but I love the way that the monster looks, and I love the implication of the monster. Although I feel like both of the movies that this monster is in are kind of underwhelming. The second one much more so than the first one. But I think my favorite, it just looks cool, it's fierce, it's unstoppable.
Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Not Killer Clowns, but that's an awesome movie. Killer Clowns. And also I another honorable mention would be I think the Babadook is actually really cool. Although
I have not seen the Babadook.
That ends up it ends up being a little different than but I think the idea of the Babadook is really cool. But I'm getting off the subject here. My probably my favorite movie monster. I think it looks cool. It's unstoppable. It comes out and it does your bidding basically. If you've been wronged, it's Pumpkinhead. I love Pumpkinhead. You're like I don't know. I don't know.
I've seen the DVD box art for Pumpkinhead.
Yeah.
but I've
So
never seen a
it's
pumpkin
just
head.
this very large creature with this enormous head and these scaly, these long arms. It's like
Yeah.
10, 12 feet tall. I don't know.
I feel like Pumpkinhead's like bargain bin horror movie
Oh,
monster.
no.
It's like you find it like you find like 4 movies and like for like
Well,
on
maybe,
Blu-ray for like $2, and
maybe,
you're like
maybe Pumpkinhead.
you're like, you know what? I will pay $2 for this.
Pumpkinhead would be lumped in there with Rawhead Rex, probably. Remember Rawhead Rex?
No.
Yeah, well, it's the Clive Barker story, but it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
But no, I like Pumpkinhead.
So you have Pumpkinhead, you have Pinhead, you have Rawhead
Pinhead,
Rex.
yes. You have who?
What was the Clive Barker one you just said?
Oh, Rawhead Rex, yeah.
Yeah, Rawhead Rex.
For some reason, I thought you said Ryan Reynolds. I was like, Ryan Reynolds is a movie monster? What?
Yes.
What did I miss? No,
Amityville.
I think so. So they just came out with a trailer for the new Candyman.
Yep.
It's not a remake. I guess it's just sequel or something. I don't think it looks very good. The original Candyman, I think, is great, but this doesn't look good. But if you're gonna reboot or remake Candyman, I think Pumpkinhead is the way to go. I think they should do Pumpkinhead. So the first Pumpkinhead came out, I think, in 1988, and then the second one came out in the early 90s. And honestly, I think the second one was direct to DVD, or at that time direct to video, and it stinks. The first one is okay, but I feel like they could have done so much more with it. So I guess that's my favorite movie monster, but it showed a lot of promise.
Interesting.
But they could do more with it. Yeah, that's just the one. It just popped into my head.
When you say Pumpkinhead, my brain automatically goes to Trick or Treat, because isn't it like
the little guy? I don't know.
Does he have a pumpkin face?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got a little jack-o'-lantern face.
But yeah, I've not. I like I said, I worked at Blockbuster, so I remember the DVD box art fairly well.
Yeah.
But I have never. I always jumped over it because it just looked awful, god awful.
Well, so again, come October, come Halloween time, obviously, we should probably do a lot of horror films. And
Yeah.
I think Pumpkinhead, again, it's not a great movie. Unfortunately, it's just not a great movie. But I don't think it's terrible. The second one is terrible.
Okay.
The second one has Punky Brewster in it, for crying out loud. It's bad. It's real bad. But I believe, Punky Brewster. But anyway. That's my pick.
That's our movie monster. So send us your favorite movie monster, comment on your favorite movie monster, and shoot us an email. We're realshame@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe, like the show. Tell your friends about it, and we'll see you next time.